Sridhar, it was an interesting introduction. They said that you left Google to try to get people to give up Google. But not only did you leave Google, you were the guy running ads at Google for 5 years. And then you founded Neva, which is a search engine without any ads at all. What happened there?
Well, I was at Google for a long time, 15 plus years. And when I left, I didn't think I would start Neva. I joined Greylock as a venture partner. But my co-founder Vivek and I got super excited by the idea of rethinking what's like something that all of us use all the time, search. We didn't just want to create another search engine. We wanted to create a search engine with a purpose. And we wanted to be able to innovate. That's sort of how Neva came to be as an ads-free, private, customer-paid search engine. So it's a dramatic turnaround. There's a bunch of complicated reasons that we will get into for why we structured it that way. But we wanted to create a very different kind of search product in which there was a lot more user value and a lot more innovation baked in from day one.
Yeah, but we all use Google.
Yep.
And we use it for free because there are ads there.
Yep.
And Google's built a system, just to make your opponent's case for them,
yep,
that the ads are actually relevant because if they're not going to show up. You know this because you ran the practice for the company.
That's right. That's right.
What is the drawback of having ads in a free search engine?
So first of all, there's no limit to ads-driven monetization. Okay, it's one thing for us to say, oh, one ad on top, it's a great service, that's fine. But it doesn't stop there. All companies need to keep growing. They need to keep making money. And so the pressure to show more and more ads is very strong. Sure, on queries that are not commercial, you're not going to see ads. But on commercial queries, the list keeps getting longer and longer. Over 40%, first two screens are full of ads. But more importantly, even the organic portions of search, what Google can and cannot do, are affected by the ads business model. There's a reason, for example, that travel queries on Google produce a very textual experience. That's because making the organic search full of pictures, things that you might want to see, kills ads monetization. Producing something like search results in Suggest, which I'll talk about in a second, there are lots of features that you just cannot do in an ads-driven model. With Neva, a lot of these constraints are just gone. Obviously, the first job is to get you great results, but we can do so much more. A recent change that we launched is one in which we show search results right in the Suggest box, even before you get to a page. Why? For more than 50% of queries, you're going to click on one of the links that we suggest right there and go to the result. You never saw a page. You never saw any ads. You just got to where you wanted to go a whole lot faster. That's something that can never be done in an ad-supported model. Similarly, personalization and ads don't really work together. If, let's say, you want only results from Aria and Patagonia and some other brands when you're looking for clothes, that's not really a feature that an ad-supported search engine wants to support because ad monetization is driven by competition. So if you're searching for a vest, they want as many people to compete for that query as possible. And so personalization goes out of the way.
Yeah. Let's put a pin in that.
Yeah.
So if you want to only see results from Patagonia, Google will never allow that to happen because they want Patagonia and all of its competitors to bid on those keywords.
100%.
But Neva, if people are paying you and there are no ads, you give people the ability to go in and pick the vendors that they want to see from or the different types of shops?
That's a feature that we are working on. We have definitely done that for areas like news.
Yeah, what about news? Can you expand a little bit?
So we let you, so for example, in Neva, you can go and say, hey, I have subscriptions to these things. Maybe you have subscription to the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal or something else. You pick them, and from then on, those get prioritized. So when you look for something, all things being equal, we're going to show you results from the people that you care about. Similarly, in shopping, we're working on a feature where you say, I only want these kinds of merchants. People ask us for features like, when I look for clothing, I only want to see stores that ethically source their material. All of these things now become possible because we are not driven by ads monetization. We are not driven by, hey, as many people need to compete as possible. Honestly, the simplest query that makes people love Neva is when they literally search for a company's name. And the first two results are from their competitor. State Farm Insurance, okay, as a query in the US, does more to sell people on Neva than what I can do. Because you type State Farm Insurance, the first result you're going to see is Farmers Insurance.
And Google.
On Google,
Right.
because they are competing by bidding on those terms. And so it's that kind of competition that becomes a liability for the ads model as there is more and more pressure to monetize.
Okay, so you have customizable results
Yep.
that users can say, this is what I want to see. You don't have a page of ads that show up before you get to the results.
We just get you to your results as quickly as we can.
What other cool stuff can you do?
We also let you bring index your personal data if you like.
So what does that look like?
So for example, a lot of us have files stored on Dropbox. A lot of us have, at work, for example, we'll have design files. We'll have things stored in Notion or in Jira. So you can connect those accounts and have us be able to index it. So Neva becomes a search engine for all the data that matters in a particular context, whether it is personal or whether it's work. For my personal Neva account, I have my cloud storage index. So if I want to look for my tax returns, I just type like taxes 2021, and there shows up the folder. That comes naturally. We also do other things in addition. We make an extension that prevents tracking. So the thing that really annoys people is you search and promptly there are ads on social media. It's not part of the core product, but we take a strong privacy stance, similar to Apple and other companies. So we prevent that. Same with our browser. We have tracking prevention built into it. It's really all about making the internet, making the core search service on the browser work for you as opposed to exploiting you. That's what the business model really enables.
Yeah, I'm hearing you talk, and I'm starting to think, there's a difference for a company when they build for a user that's also their customer, or a company that builds for a user and their customer is somebody else, whether that's recruiters or advertisers. So, we have a lot of folks in the audience that are working to build their own companies. Talk a little bit about the incentives that we create for ourselves based off of our business model and how, you were at Google, you had one of those incentives for a while, and now you've changed it up. So what do you think about that?
So I think aligned incentives matter a lot. And whenever companies take decisions that go against that alignment, or they don't have principles clearly laid out, that can become very problematic. And so for Neva, I think being aligned on the customer, focusing on that long-term relationship, how we deliver value to you over the long term, defines the company. Early on, for Google Search, being ad-supported was OK, because ads were not like the dominant part of the search experience. My team used to pride itself on the fact that we were very user-focused. Quality really mattered. I ran the search ads team for like over 10 years when I was at Google. But what happens is when there is relentless pressure, unless you have clear lines that are drawn, you're going to err on the side of making more money. You're going to err on the side of supporting advertisers. You can literally lose your way. This is why setting companies early on with strong principles matter a lot. Over the past 20, 25 years, we've sort of have created a corporate world in which the only thing that matters are the end results, or the profits, or what happens to your employees, to your shareholders. And I think that's produced a set of products that really are not about the user anymore.
So I was looking through my notes from, here they are, from our call before this. And I found something that I think that might apply to this. I kind of forgot what it was all about, but I just wrote down 4 words.
Yeah.
Porn ads on search. So
what was that?
Porn ads on search.
Yeah.
Is that something that was going on at Google or?
So it's like Google had porn ads on search for a very long time, but it was also a company that took these kinds of principles very seriously.
Yeah.
And the head of Google, comms and policy at the time, Rachel, and I had a pretty serious discussion about whether we should continue this practice. And we decided that, this was not really good for our users. And it happened at a time when there was enough flexibility to give up on a 9-digit business.
Yeah, so what is the pro and the con of having porn ads on search?
Well, first of all,
sorry, I feel like we should just talk through it. It's like a pretty good
we can
example.
talk through this. I mean, the pro clearly is the money.
Yeah.
Okay, there are advertisers, and you can
9-figure
argue
business.
that. What's that?
9-figure business.
9-figure business. There are advertisers. They are like, hey, we are advertising about a legitimate activity. Who are you to judge whether this is okay or not? That's like the pro argument. The con argument at the time which I think was right, was wait, so much porn is free on the internet. The only people that are willing to advertise porn ads are the ones that are like that extra degree up there in terms of how bad things can be. This was just not something that we wanted to be associated with. And this is an example of a good decision. And increasingly, one of the questions we need to ask with very large companies is, do they have a framework for making these kinds of trade-offs? Because if you are beholden to revenue, if you're beholden to growth, you've seen this with like the Facebook papers, it becomes very hard to create an environment in which people are actually making decisions that are positive for the users. Ads represent a fundamental conflict of interest. They're about serving advertisers. They're not really about serving users. You know, at some minimal level or as an additional revenue on top of like a revenue source that already exists, like a subscription, they might be okay. But ads as the only revenue source will just drive you towards doing things that are worse and worse for users. It's really very hard to avoid.
When you looked at the Facebook papers stories, all this stuff that's come out about Facebook, did part of you say it's kind of like looking at the mirror, not in terms of Neva, but the stuff that you saw at Google, and are there similar incentives between those two companies?
So I think the thing that surprised me about the Facebook papers was, you know, maybe they're there and maybe they're not revealed, but as an executive who is leading these teams, one always has to look at trade-offs. So, you know, your team will come do a bunch of research. At some point, depending on who the decision maker is, in ads, for example, it was me, or sometimes it would be a combination of me and Philip, the business side, or me and Kent on the policy side. But it'll come down to something relatively straightforward, like we can make this metric that is bad for our users go down by 2%. Let's say some kind of happiness metric, we are like, our unhappiness metric, we can reduce the unhappiness metric by some amount, and we will lose some amount of revenue. Okay, so let's say you make your users 1% more happy, you're going to lose 0.5% of revenue. Is that a good trade-off?
Seems like a good deal.
So the answer is it depends.
Okay.
But the more important nuance is that an executive that does not want to lose money, okay, remember the earnings report or the earnings expectation for next quarter are loaded up.
Right.
Wall Street is expecting that you're going to do something, and you're going to potentially make a decision that's going to make you disappoint your investors, and it might tank your stock. So the real question becomes, is there a framework for making these kinds of decisions? And a smart executive that does not want to make this decision can make it always sound perfectly rational by telling his or her team, prove to me beyond doubt that there is no way that you can get 1% extra of happiness with less than 0.5% loss in revenue. You can always send them on a wild goose chase where you say, please go try harder. I want a 1:1% trade-off. And so this really comes down to a few people that are willing to look at things like this and say, this is a good trade-off. Like the porn ads were a case where we made the trade-off and said, that's not a business we want. Similarly, we've also walked away for 3-4 months from rehab ads. There was like this whole scandal around it because we said, we can't tell between the good and the bad people when it comes to advertising. We're going to stop it for 4 months while we figure out a system. We swallowed that loss. So it becomes a question of, are there these kinds of frameworks? Are people actively making these trade-offs? Who is holding them accountable? Facebook reports revenue. Does it report happiness? It doesn't. And so these are the kinds of questions we need to ponder.
If there was a whistleblower inside Google, someone like Frances Haugen who said, I want to share all these documents with the public that they need to see.
Yeah.
What would it look like? Like, would it be anywhere near as explosive? Or what would they walk away with from Google that might open people's eyes?
Companies are complicated. There's always lots and lots of decisions about things. There's been plenty written about even like the reasons why I left, things like bad content on YouTube. There's just, companies are complicated, especially if you have a global footprint.
Why do you think YouTube escaped so much scrutiny? Everyone likes to beat up on Facebook. which might be well deserved, but YouTube isn't really talked about very much.
I mean, YouTube went through its own year in 2017. It's just like, as I've talked about how it was a heartache for me. I've talked about how it convinced me that I didn't want any part of ads after that, and I really, moved out. I think we vastly underestimate the scale and impact of these platforms. And the other thing to remember is that a lot of these teams and products are led by vaguely libertarian Americans with a very stylized view of what they think free speech is, and no responsibility whatsoever, that are perfectly willing to hide behind things like Section 230. Oh, Section 230, I'm not responsible for any content. If it's not illegal, it's on my platform. And so I would say there is a real lack of insight into how these platforms are doing. And the classic example that I give of something like this is take the January 6th insurrection. A lot of us were completely shocked. But to this day, we have no idea how many Facebook posts were recommended or how many YouTube ads were recommended to other people that actively encourage them to join the insurrection. There's just a complete lack of visibility. I know that in Europe, we passed things like GDPR and the cookie screens, and I've forgotten how horrible they are. It's been 2 years since I came to Europe, and they're even worse than before. They don't actually accomplish anything. But I would say a demand for increased scrutiny into metrics that matter is long overdue for a lot of these platforms. You just need that information. I don't care if they don't provide it to the public. At the very least, they should be providing it to regulators. Because this stuff, and I've said this before, this kind of stuff is easily measurable.
Yeah.
How much misinformation is there? How much really bad stuff is there? They should measure it. They should be forced to report it.
It is amazing how that libertarian view of what should be on, what should be on, and what should be removed always seems to correlate pretty well with increased ad revenue.
I mean, there is that.
Yeah.
It applies across the board.
Right.
Remember, the best brains of the last 20 years have been working on how to get people to click more on dumb shit.
Yeah.
We kind of collectively get what we all sort of signed up for. At some level, Neva is a genuine attempt to say, no, technology should be about serving people. Technology should be low cost. You should have a clear idea of what it is that a product is doing. I hope we succeed, but the intention very much is to take technology back to serving people. What is amazing about technology, Alex, is the people that can create a product that runs for 50 million people and delivers value for them are usually quite capable of doing it for 1 billion people. The incremental cost is very low. We are in a situation with ad-supported companies where they reap the benefits of scale. The bigger the system gets, the more money they make. The products typically don't get better for you and me. And that's why we want to turn this model upside down on its head and say, we want to create scale technology that has user benefit built in from early on and strong principles about what we will and will not do.
Yeah. All right. I think we have a couple more minutes. There's still a bunch of people here. It's the last session of the day. So why don't we end having some fun, take a quick spin through the big tech companies. You're a big tech guy, so we'd get your perspective on all of that.
Trying to be a small tech guy, but yeah.
Small tech, yeah. All right, let's go for it. So let's talk about Apple first.
Yeah.
There seems to be a case with Apple. They haven't built an amazing software product since the operating system for the iPad. They can build hardware. They did the AirPods and they did the watch. But you look at the stuff they try to do software-wise, Siri's not working. The autonomous car is a software program more than it is hardware. That's not going anywhere. Are you optimistic about the future of Apple?
They will keep changing. They have 650 million paying subscribers for their services.
Yeah, they're going to make money on services.
I think they get it. These kinds of companies are slow to change. Google, for example, I knew the progress of the hardware team. It was a real mindset shift for them to say 18-month cycle.
Right.
Similarly, early Google was all about how do you release every day. And that's a concept that people at the time in the early 2000s just did not grok. I think Apple needs to figure out that things like delivering web software is very, very different from doing hardware devices or shipping stuff on the phone. And they have to adapt. And these changes are hard. By the way, Google did not adapt well for the first many years into the monthly App Store cadence. because we were used to releasing stuff every day. And all of a sudden, you're like, wait, there's an approval process, 30 days? So all of these things take time.
Yeah. Do you like the meta name? Is that going to solve all Facebook's problems?
Well, it's a gutsy change that only a founder can make. To me, that is like the benefit of having the founder really be in charge of the company. Only Mark could have pulled off this change.
Yeah.
And even in my time at Google, we could not have pulled off enhanced campaigns. I don't know if you remember that. If not for the fact that Larry is like, just go, do it.
Yeah.
You needed that kind of support to pull these change. I think it's a gutsy change. Here's the thing that is, unknowable, which is like we are a thing. Remember, we said AR was a thing. We said voice was a thing. Our ability to make forecasts about how like the world will evolve.
It's pretty good.
It's super.
You were on AR before everybody else. It's just that Google Glass was a little ahead of its time.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
By like the timing is hard, the technology is hard. I think it's a bold and gutsy move. I hope it doesn't take away from like attention on the problems that Facebook actually does need to solve. But it's a gutsy change.
All right, let's quickly just go to Amazon. Amazon after Jeff Bezos still as competitive, or does it lose a step under Andy Jassy?
I think they are an incredibly competitive driven company. And I think the bench is very deep and very strong. I think the question is, will there be the meta moment? Will there be the Facebook goes all in on mobile kind of moment, or Google goes all in on Android kind of moment? I think those are the transitions that are much harder for professional CEOs to navigate. But in the meanwhile, I think the company has enormous momentum.
Yeah, all right. And then lastly, Microsoft. We talked a lot about Google, so we won't cover that.
Yeah.
Microsoft, they had a bit of a pact with Google that they weren't going to try to get them in trouble for antitrust stuff. And then, now they seem to be poking the bear a little bit. They're cheering on the antitrust movement. Does that eventually come back and bite them in the ass?
I mean, I don't know that much about that, but I have to say it's a company with momentum. There are not many companies that are that large that can reinvent themselves. I think what they have done with Azure and Office is like quite remarkable. As I said, most companies don't really pull off these things in terms of transformation, not at that size. They deserve a lot of credit, for that. But at that kind of size, I think, and the kind of era that we are entering, the era of Tim Wu and Lena Khan, there's going to be a lot more attention. So hopefully everybody behaves and there's more competition and opportunity for companies like Neva.
Yeah, I think they're playing with fire. Okay, before we go, if people want to try out Neva, where do they go?
Well, so we are a US-only product. I apologize. We should be here early on, early next year. We're hoping to come to Western Europe in like late Q1, early Q2. But our site is neva.com. You can register your interest with an email. We hope to be in Europe pretty soon.
Well, thank you, Sridhar. I've enjoyed our conversation as always. And I think everybody should, keep paying attention to this stuff. It's going to be really interesting. Sridhar Ramaswamy, everyone. Thank you, Sridhar.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you.
Thank you. Good stuff.